what exactly is happening with Mac Jones and the New England Patriots? That's really the question. Usually I try to put some spin on it or something like that. And I was going to initially, if Bailey Zappi had been great, we were going to talk about like, who does he compare to? But he was not great because he's Bailey Zappi. Mac Jones gets pulled from that game. Bill Belichick claims that that was the plan all along, which might be true because Adam Schefter reported it before the game that there was a chance that both quarterbacks were going to see the field. And then Belichick said he didn't put Mac back in because of the score. But this tomfoolery that's going on clearly took the entire roster by surprise of the Patriots. What is your running theory about what is going on with Mac Jones?
Well, is he the starting quarterback? Is he not the starting quarterback? That feels like a team that doesn't want to rush a guy back from injury. But also the fact that it's not as good of a season for him. Obviously, injuries play a part of that. How much of that comes down to whatever the hell the Patriots are doing at offensive coordinator? You had Josh McDaniels, one of the most talented and gifted offensive coordinators in the league over the past couple of years. I mean, he got the best out of Mac Jones in his rookie season. He looked like the best rookie quarterback there in that class last year. And this year, he's just kind of fallen off the face of the earth because he's got Joe Judge and Matt Patricia as his offensive coordinators. And we saw how those two kind of tanked organizations in New York and Detroit. So I think a lot of it comes down to the dual offensive coordinator role. Also, the fact that we all knew kind of Mac Jones had this ceiling, and did he reach that with Josh McDaniels last year? And did Bill Belichick see that he could get something out of Bailey Zappi? And it just doesn't seem like that's the case. But I think a lot of it, for me, comes down to Bill Belichick getting his ego in the way, saying, I can do this without an offensive coordinator, without Tom Brady, and let's put these two clowns as offensive coordinator and see what happens. And the offense has struggled because of it.
I think that's very true. And Bailey Zappi also had a pretty good showing against Detroit, which is a horrendous football team. Once again, always and forever Detroit. And that may have spun some people's ideas of what Bailey Zappi actually was, that every once in a while we see a backup quarterback come off the bench and do pretty well. And of course, that's where the old saying comes from, which we haven't had to go back to that very often, but the old saying about, you know, the most popular guy is the backup quarterback. Well, in recent modern NFL, that doesn't really exist, but this year is a weird season. And as poor as Mac Jones played early on, and then to have Bailey Zappi come in, you could see where the fans would be like, hey, it's working for this guy, with really no context involved, that they were playing some bad teams, running a lot of play action, had a lot of success running and playing defense that would allow Bailey Zappi to look good. And then he was exposed last night when he actually had to step back and throw the football. And the funny thing was Mac Jones looked pretty spry to start the game and then threw this inexplicable interception, which screamed to me. And now there's the cool thing. You can see the dots. And so people will tweet out the little dots that show you what happened on the play, that Mac Jones on the interception had a very easy check down right in front of him, which I guarantee a year ago he makes that play because he was comfortable with what he's doing. And instead he was pressing, trying to make a big play on the move, almost to show like, oh yeah, like Mac's here, time to make some big plays. That's not really who Mac Jones actually is as a quarterback. I think he's more of the game manager who needs a good supporting cast, a really good scheme to help him, good defense, which are all things that you should be able to achieve on a rookie quarterback contract. And it's not like the guy can't play. He showed last year that he can play. I would not expect megastar performances from him like Patrick Mahomes, but he can play in the NFL. What's very confusing to me is what in the world Bill Belichick was doing with a lot of stuff. I mean, your focus is on the offensive coordinator situation. 100% agree on that. But also, how about the roster? I mean, you look at the receiving group that they've tried to fill out. Devontae Parker, like on Madden a couple of years ago, was really good, but the guy never really plays a full season. He's been banged up. Jacoby Myers is a decent player, probably a number 2 at best on another team with an elite wide receiver. And that's kind of all they have. So they're lacking weapons. They have a decent running game, but it's not unbelievable. And they spent a bunch of money a couple of years ago on 2 tight ends that they decided to go all in on. Very, very strange handling of the situation in general. And I also think that Belichick still believes that his defense will just stop everyone, and they'd stop nothing as far as last night against the Chicago Bears. And I do think there's a tendency when a game is on national TV and we all watch it to way overreact to that one game. So it is just one game, but I think their handling of Mac Jones is as bad as anybody has handled a young quarterback going into his second year, where it seemed kind of laid out for you. If you just give him the right circumstances, just hire a regular offensive coordinator, my gosh. And it seemed to manipulate Mac Jones from day one about the way this was handled. And then your backup goes in, plays pretty well. All of a sudden you're talking about people wanting the backup to play. It seems like a downright toxic situation at the moment, but that is based on one game. Things could change. I think that beyond any of that, one of the weirdest things here is Belichick not telling anybody what he was going to do with the quarterbacks. Like, okay, I get competitive advantage, but you're messing with your own players. Like the offensive line and everybody, like they practice all week with this quarterback, and then he's only going to play for one series or two series or three series. Like what? And Bailey Zappi said after the game that he found out when everybody else did that he was going in. So you didn't even tell him what was going on? Like Belichick's mind games, they used to work when Tom Brady would just take care of business.
Yeah.
They do not work with younger players, with Mac Jones, with a roster that's mediocre. And it feels like the Patriots are sort of done being competitive for a while. And how much longer does Belichick even want to go? Because if you're Robert Kraft, you have to be looking at this and going, all right, Bill, I think time has passed you by a little bit. Some of this tomfoolery that you're doing here with your players and with the coaching staff and everything else, it's not working anymore. And they have a promising young quarterback. Mac Jones, by the way, everybody, Mac Jones' career not over after last night. Okay. So it seemed like everyone was ready to declare that, but I think that they really have to look closely at, like, does Belichick still have it? Or was that kind of ended last year? Was that maybe the last year where it seemed like he knew what he was doing?
I think this is also the final nail in the coffin, in that the Patriot way only works with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady there together. Outside of that, you take any other part of that and try and put it in a different organization, it just doesn't work. It hasn't worked. We've seen coaches go from the Patriots and go on to do their own thing for 20 years now, and it's never worked. It's very rarely worked. And Tom Brady left. He got a Super Bowl thanks to Bruce Arians and the amazing supporting cast he had there. But Tom Brady also did have to play really well there in Tampa Bay to do that. But I think this just feels like the final nail in the coffin that, yeah, Bill Belichick's a great coach, but the coaches around him, underneath him, do not hire them, because they're not going to be able to bring that to your organization. We've seen that time and time again. We're seeing it again this year in Las Vegas with Josh McDaniels. But yeah, the quarterback situation is so weird, because you have this guy who you drafted super high in the first round, and you put a bunch of stock into him. You went out and, because you're on the rookie quarterback contract, you invested a lot, which the Patriots normally don't do. You invested a lot in the wide receivers, as you said, the tight ends, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, and they just haven't gotten enough out of those wide receivers. It seems like the receivers they brought in, it was money in bad places for those guys, guys that definitely didn't deserve the contracts that they got from the Patriots. It seemed like a set of moves that was, it feels desperate now, you looking back at it.
Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, like these are not game changers. And I think that we've sort of seen that over the last few years, even with someone like Christian Kirk, who I think is a good receiver in Jacksonville, but they're paying him like an elite receiver, and he's not really a game changer. He's good, but he's not a game changer. And so I think if you're going to have a bunch of good, you've got to have a lot of it. You've got to have three guys who are real good and have all of them in their contracts work out. And otherwise, you should be taking swings in the draft at players who could be potentially really good, because I think what we see in the NFL now, especially this year with how weird it's been with quarterbacks, is there are a lot of B- football players at quarterback. And with the circumstance, they can be pushed into an A or they can be sunk into a C. And that's actually Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers now too, that their supporting casts are sinking them down to C or C minus quarterbacks. Whereas there are other guys, and Geno Smith is probably part of this, with good receivers, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. We'll see about Metcalf's injury, but Tyler Lockett has long been a really underrated and terrific receiver. And their running game in Seattle is phenomenal now with Kenneth Walker. It's like, oh yeah, that's a really good situation. And Geno Smith, who's probably been closer to a B minus quarterback, he's good now. Mac Jones, you have a very bad situation with, like you said, mismanagement, the salary cap, overpaying mediocre players, putting bad guys at the offensive coordinator position who were never offensive coordinators before, which is just madness. And we called this from day one. I think even when we were talking about like what team will lose way more games than they did last year, it's like Patriots. They didn't get better and they made the worst decision with their coaching staff. They could circumstance, scheme, all these things. The Jimmy Garoppolo type effect of someone who's a B minus quarterback that can be an A at any given time. And all these guys are fluctuating from year to year and even week to week based on situation, opponent, matchup, whatever else. Whereas the consistent guys are at the top, of course, your Joe Burrow, who's phenomenal, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, like those guys are staying at the top. Well, everybody else is kind of floating around depending on what's around him. So Mac Jones's future going forward, I mean, this could be a situation where this guy just wants out like now. Yeah. And I don't think that he's going to get traded or anything like that. The Patriots won't do that, but they're going to have to resolve the issues that they have created themselves surrounding Mac Jones, who I think still has plenty of potential to be a good quarterback under the right circumstances.